Hello everyone, it's your friend Voodoo 51292 here, and this is a Voodoo's Verdict, part of my honest and thorough game review series. And today we are going to be taking a look at yet another game that is, I believe anyway, that it's from the same people behind a game that we played earlier this year that I really enjoyed, Child of Light. Ubisoft Montpellier, and running on the UbiArt engine. At least I think it's Montpellier, right? Or Montreal. I don't know. One of the two. Anyway, I think it's Montpellier. But regardless of all that, it runs on the UbiArt engine, just like Child of Light earlier this year, and of course other games such as Rayman, the more recent Raymans. This game is a unique game. Is a unique game, and it is called The Valiant Hearts: The Great War. Before we get started, I do want to make a note and say that you should be seeing this video, or at least have the option to see the video in full 1080p HD. It's part of my current movement right now to upgrade my entire channel to 1080p, including all vlogs and gameplay videos. So hopefully you enjoy seeing me in full high def. I got a couple of freaking like zits or something that popped up overnight, so I'm sure that's great to get on 1080p, but whatever. Anyway, on to the game. Now, I played this game on the PC, and what the game is it focuses around World War I. And World War I is kind of that war that everyone forgets. You know, everybody knows all this kind of stuff about World War II, of course, in the late 30s and 40s. That's the one that most people spend time learning about. They make documentaries and they teach in schools mainly about World War II. But World War I, which happened, of course, in the 19 teens, was of course the one that sort of started it all and set the stage for World War II, and that one's really not talked about enough. But this game is all about World War I, and it highlights a bunch of different things about the war. Of course, the horrors of the war, you know, how many people died, sometimes how brutal the war could truly be, but it also highlights a lot of the good aspects of war, the friendships that are formed, the fun that was had at times by soldiers, times when, you know, two opposing forces like the Allied forces and maybe a German would find themselves in a precarious situation, and they'd actually help each other out. They'd help each other to live, and a lot of times medics from one side or the other would help soldiers of the opposing forces because it was just in their nature to do so. So it really showed the human side of the war, in addition to you know, the sort of inhuman aspects of the war. By the way, I'm sorry about my dogs barking. Our grass guy is here cutting grass, and that just blows their mind, even though he comes every week. They can't get over the fact that he's here. But anyway, so if it gets too obnoxious, I'll go tell him to shut up. So, yeah. Now, you will play as a few different people. You'll actually play people from both sides of the war. Sort of one of the main themes going on is that there's a family. There's a French woman who's married to a German man, and they have a son together. And of course, when the war happens, the husband, who's German, they're living in France. He gets deported and he has to go fight for the Germans, while the wife's father is a Frenchman and he has to enroll in the French forces. And so a lot of the story is regarding that sort of crazy dynamic. Is they're both fighting for their country against the other countries, but they still. You know, the father loves his son-in-law because, I assume he's a good husband and a good father, and so there's that dynamic. And the Frenchman, whose name is Emile, he runs across and makes friends with an American soldier whose name's Freddie, and they have a friendship together. There is a medic woman named Anna who you will play as, and so really you see a bunch of different aspects of the war from various angles and people involved in it. The game is 2D, of course, as all the games on the UbiArt engine are. And mainly what the game is it's a puzzle game. That's really what it is at its core. And you know, you'll go through the different stages, and there's so many different kind of puzzles to I couldn't sit here and explain them all, but there's a lot of different mechanics. Sometimes it's just you need to get a you know, you need to get a certain item, and in order to do that, you know, he'll give you the item if you give him this item. Well, to get that item, you have to give another item to somebody else, and it's just kind of this loop, and it's a puzzle. You got to go around and figure out, how do I get this certain item, turn it into this guy, he'll give me this item, then I can go and bring it to this guy, etc. There's also, you know, your typical sort of physics-based puzzles, and of course a big part of the gameplay is the dog. Now, unlike Call of Duty Ghosts, that put all this work into the dog and it was really pretty useless, this game really implements the dog extremely well. The dog will follow all the characters at some point, and he can be used. He comes into a big use in puzzles. Oftentimes, you know, there's a little hole that you need to go through to get an item or something you can't fit through, but you can control the dog to do that. You can hold down a button and it goes into the dog mode, and it'll just put a number, if you're playing on PC, or a button on a gamepad on different things that the dog can do, and you just hit that button and the dog will go do it. There's also oftentimes a foreground and background mechanic where you know, you can go from the foreground into the background to find an item, or sometimes you have to send the dog into the background and you walk in the foreground, he'll follow you, and then the dog can get something in the background and bring it back to you. There's a couple of pseudo boss fights, I guess you could say, although there's really no particular combat in the game. It's really not a combat based game. And again, the boss fights are usually based on puzzle mechanics. There's different sort of quick time events in the game, quick time activities that you have to do. There's a few scenes where you're maybe in a car, and the shot is filming the front of the car as you're coming toward the camera, looking behind you, and there'll be people chasing you that maybe you have to avoid, or maybe they'll be dropping bombs on you and you'll have to avoid the shadows on the ground where the bombs are going to hit. Stuff like that, and it's really cool because all those scenes are done to, like, the music behind them is like famous symphonic pieces like Flight of the Bumblebee, etc. And the stuff that's going on that you have to avoid, like the bombs hitting or the gun shooting you, it's all sort of in tune with the music behind you, and it's just a really cool experience. Sometimes, you know, you'll have to find a combination to a locker, and you'll have to go around and try to figure out like a cipher. So there's a variety of different puzzles in the game. I mean, it is definitely not just one type of puzzle. You'll play through the whole game, and you'll be playing all kinds of different puzzles. It really doesn't, to me, it really didn't get stale at any point. Like, the puzzles didn't really seem to get stale to me because they weren't the same puzzle. They were very different. And that's mainly the core game. I mean, there's collectibles in every stage you can find. Sometimes they're easy to find. Sometimes it's just a matter of going the opposite way of where you're supposed to go, and oh, there's a little area over here and there's a collectible. Sometimes if you bring a certain item to a character, he'll give you a collectible, so there's a little extra incentive to sort of walk around and find, you know, do extra things, more or less, to try to find these collectibles. And also during the game is done in accordance with a documentary. And I'm sorry I haven't done the research on the documentary. Maybe I should have taken a look at it. But it's done with a documentary. And so as you're playing through different stages of the game, at certain times it'll prompt you to press a button, and when you do, it brings up different sort of little historical facts about the war, or about you know, the situation you're in, or something you're doing. It'll bring up a little fact about it that you know, the documentary, I assume, provides. And you know, it's not really, there's not like these 3 pages you have to read. It's a little short paragraph, and it just gives you sort of a little explanation, and it's a little background into the war, and they give pictures, you know, actual pictures from the war, and which is really neat. I mean, it's this whole sort of experience. You're playing the game, and then at the same time, stuff will pop up, and it will give you real background on the real war and why you're doing what you're doing. Although it's a fictional game, of course, a lot of it is based around real things that happened in the war, real battles that you'll be a part of, stuff like that. So that's really neat, and it adds background, it adds depth to the story. The characters will write diaries that you can read. The characters don't really speak per se. Most of the game is told through a narrator's point of view. There's a couple times where the characters will have like sort of a voiceover. They'll be reading a letter that they wrote or something, but really they don't speak much. But the game does such a good job of building the characters and making you care about these characters simply through narration and simply through just the gameplay and the experiences you'll have playing the game. It's really sort of remarkable how they were able to do that. From that aspect, I really did enjoy. I enjoyed the atmosphere. I enjoyed the overall sort of feel of the game. And the game, I thought the game did a really good job, because anytime you're dealing with something like a world war or something, it can be very difficult sometimes to keep the game light and enjoyable, because it would be so easy to make the game so depressing, so overly sad and depressing about all the terrible stuff that happened in the war, that you're like, I don't even want to play this game. It's too dark and depressing. But the game really does a good job of balancing it well. Of course, it conveys the seriousness of the war and the hard times that stuff went through, but there's enough levity in the game. There's enough sort of funny stuff that happens in the game, and lightheartedness, all in good taste. None of it is out of taste. But there's enough good things about the game that it never gets overbearing or too dark for you. You know what I mean? To where you're like, I don't want to play this. It just depresses me. I mean, it's fun. The game, it keeps it being fun and lighthearted, and while still at the same time showing the seriousness of the war and paying reverence to the men, and women who served in the war. And so, overall, I really enjoyed the game. The game can be very emotional. If you watch the playthrough, in the final part, I basically cracked up a bit. I started tearing up, because the ending was very emotional, so it definitely will pull at your heartstrings. It'll give you maybe a new perspective sort of on the war, again, to see how inhuman people could be towards one another, but at the same time, in certain situations, people from opposing sides of the war will actually help one another, because it just shows the fact that no matter what, people are still human at their very depth, and there's just that, that feeling in people to help others. And of course, the whole crazy dynamic of, you have the French father-in-law and the German son-in-law fighting on opposite sides of the war, and yet they still love each other, and they try to take care of one another. And so it's a really neat game. I really do think it's really well done. I'll say, I think, first of all, the game is a good length. I think it took me about 6 to 7 hours to beat, and the game is $15, I think. So it's shorter than Child of Light, for sure, but I think it felt like a perfect length. It didn't feel too short to me, and it didn't feel like it dragged on too long. I felt, playing the game, it was the perfect length. You know what I mean? I thought it was really well paced and well done. I think the thing that sort of I didn't like about the game, a lot of points, and I guess you could argue this because you say, well, it's a puzzle game. But I felt that there was too much sort of trial and error in the game. Sort of too much beginner's trap type things, where you just really won't know, maybe that a certain thing will kill you, or that you need to do something right away. The best example I can give is there was one point where I was following behind a tank, and I had to stay really close to the tank because there were bombs falling behind me, and I had to run next to the tank to try to keep from the bombs. Well, all of a sudden we get to this point at the end of the road where the tank hits something, and it flips over backwards like this and crushed me, and there was no way I could avoid it. And it's just stuff like that where you're like, well, how was I ever supposed to know that, I was right on the truck's tail. How was I supposed to know that all of a sudden the truck was going to flip over and I'd have to get out of the way? There's really no way to know that unless you're just lucky the first time, or like I did, you get squished. Then hey, okay, next time I'll follow behind the tank, but not as close because it's going to flip over. And I guess in some aspects you could sort of give it a break because it is a puzzle game, and I'll be fair, the checkpoints I felt were good in the game. But at the same time, it is still kind of annoying. It's annoying to do stuff and then die and be like, there's really no way I would know that. there's just no way I would know unless I died and had to redo it. So that aspect I didn't really like too much about the game, but still, like I said, the checkpoints were good, and so, you know, from that standpoint, I can't complain too terribly much. Well, let me go tell my dogs to shut up. I'm sorry, but this is the problem trying to do stuff when I'm home by myself. Alright, so you probably just saw a little jump cut there. I just edited that out so you wouldn't have to see it. Just told my dogs to stop barking. But yeah, the whole trial and error sort of thing. And again, certain instances I can understand because it is a puzzle game, and sometimes you just have to try things in puzzle games. But at the same time, I thought there was a little too much of it, and you know, it really that wasn't necessarily for me. But all that being said, like I said, I thought the game was unique and interesting. Again, I've never seen a game that pays homage to a war like this. Just never. The game is really, really good at paying tribute and paying homage to World War I, celebrating the heroes that fought in it while shedding light on a war that I think is too often overlooked. And you know, it's really a game that addresses something that was sort of something that needed to be addressed, I guess. It just hasn't been addressed enough in this game, in this documentary, I assume, which you can look up more information on that, are working together to bring World War I to you in a new way. And this interactive way to experience the war is fantastic. I really enjoyed the game. Again, the game doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it doesn't have to. I felt the game was simple in its mechanics, but at the same time was very fun to play, and I certainly enjoyed it. I still think that I did enjoy Child of Light a bit more than this game. I can't really put my finger on it. It's probably just completely personal preference. I've seen many people out there who disagree and say that they enjoyed this game far more than they enjoyed Child of Light. I think it's just dependent on your own personal preference. I think both games are really good in their own right. They're completely different games, by the way. Don't go into Valiant Hearts thinking that you're just going to play another Child of Light. Completely different game. Just like how Rayman is completely different from either of these two games. Just because it's on the same engine means nothing. It's definitely a different game, different gameplay, completely different. But like I said, I think I enjoy Child of Light a bit more. Just like I said, just completely off of personal preference, I think. But Valiant Hearts is still a really good game, and at the end of the day, I think I'm going to give Valiant Hearts: The Great War an 8.75 out of 10. I thought it was very good. I thought that it really shed light great on World War I, and the characters were really good, the plot was really good, the music was really good. But just a little too much trial and error for me, a little too much beginner's trap kind of stuff that sort of frustrates you. Again, even though the checkpoints are good, it is just a little frustrating sometimes to go through and deal with it. But certainly, I think it's a game that you ought to check out if you've got the time, if you like the UbiArt style games, and you like puzzle games, little puzzle games. I think you should definitely check out Valiant Hearts: The Great War. I think it's a really good buy for $15, and I certainly feel that my money was well spent. So 8.75 for Valiant Hearts: The Great War, very good, and hopefully that you will enjoy. Hopefully you'll enjoy playing the game for yourself, and also enjoy my playthrough here on YouTube. So thank you very much for watching. I am Voodoo51292 with another Voodoo's Verdict, and I'll see you next time. Peace out for now.